think we can get started. I know we're right at 11:45 as well. So I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Kevin Dinino, president of KCD PR. Really excited to introduce an awesome panel here. And I'll go in order of my screen. It might be different than yours, but we have John Maxfield from Bank Director Magazine, Penny Crosman from American Banker, and Lianna Brinded from Yahoo Finance UK. And so thanks for staying up late with us, Lianna, as well. And it looks like right in the nick of time, there he is, Jim Pavia from CNBC joining us too. Jim, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. So
all good.
Just made intros to everyone. Really excited to get into this panel and get to know you all better. And I know we were kind of chit-chatting in the beginning just in terms of kind of COVID questions. So I promise only one COVID question. And I'll start with you, Jim, as the as kind of being the editorial director at CNBC's digital coverage. What has life been like operating in sort of a digital landscape and running a newsroom from home?
It's been challenging because you don't have that interpersonal relationship, that you do all day long with staff. But the technology is there. From a production standpoint, we haven't missed a beat. I mean, we're producing copy all day long. We're having video meetings from morning right through the afternoons with people. The connection's there. But having worked in a newsroom for 30 plus years, there's something to be said about human contact. We've lost that right now in terms of being with each other. But as I said, the technology's there. So we're on top of the news. People are working longer because there's not a lot to do. I live in New York City, and it's a tough place to be right now because so many things are closed. They're opening it up, but day to day, we're getting stuff done.
That's good to hear. Lianna, how about you across the pond in the UK in terms of at Yahoo Finance UK? Any feelings on sort of how you guys have reacted?
Yeah, so when it comes to Yahoo Finance and Yahoo Finance UK, we work very much in sync, like generally globally. So although I'm sitting in the UK, my team, we work around the clock with Asia, with APAC, and then, of course, with the US as well, and East Coast and West Coast. So even prior to COVID, it was kind of 24/7 anyway. But what COVID really showed is that, how key communication is. And actually in terms of the productivity level, I feel that for us on Yahoo Finance, we've kind of already lived this kind of experience in terms of everything's a lot more digital. We've been very much all over the place in terms of lots of reporters will be out and about. So some people will be working from a different office. So we've always, in a way, we'd already been primed for this kind of level, even in terms of taking away the human element. Obviously, there's something missing in that. But it hasn't been as challenging for us as we think it may be for other teams, but obviously, as we'll discover, it has been different working practices as well as I'm echoing someone's. And so, there's we've been kind of primed for it. So in terms of productivity, in terms of how we've been working, it seems to be fine.
Great. Penny and John, feel free to share. I'm curious sort of what life's been like, working at various magazines as well.
Yeah, very similar. I mean, we're a daily news cycle newspaper also, and our staff was pretty distributed anyway. We have people in Washington, people in Atlanta, people in South Carolina, a couple people in Los Angeles. And so we are used to being very distributed and not all being in the same office. But as Jim and Lianna both said, we do lose those side conversations, those abilities to build friendships and kind of better understand each other through those little conversations you might have in an office about, your weekend or, your kids or all that sort of thing. So very similar.
Yeah, and you know what? We talked about this before. We're a quarterly publication, so that like frequent frenetic kind of connection isn't quite as important for us. And the other thing is that I'm the editor-in-chief. I've always worked remotely. My predecessor as the editor-in-chief has always worked remotely, so it's kind of always been a part of our DNA. What I would say, though, is to kind of take the other side of the argument, is that our writers who have not always worked remotely have enjoyed the productivity boost that they've gotten from working at home. So I think that there's certainly two sides of the story.
I guess feel free to chime in. Question for the group, but have you noticed any difference in terms of connecting with sources? I know some of you are probably used to meeting people for coffee, whether it's fintech founders or bank CEOs, et cetera. But curious if that's impacted sort of the kind of source coverage, if you will, as well.
I do think when it comes to that, I mean, regardless of whether it's digital or whether it's a magazine or whether it's a newspaper, I think one of the key things when it comes to like media and journalism and making contacts is that human element. Is going out for a coffee, it's meeting at a conference, it's meeting on the sidebar, it's catching up over a drink, to find like source. And all those things have been removed. And so it was really interesting. The other day, I was speaking to one of my reporters and he's being like, I've been doing loads of source meetings. Like, how is that? And it has really changed in the sense of we've all got this kind of fatigue when it comes to meetings, when it comes to being on digital, because not only do we do it for a job, that's our only face-to-face contact. But what he's been doing, which has been apparently really great, is doing these virtual coffees and actually sitting down with a coffee cup and having that half an hour and actually doing that. But in a way, despite digitally it making it easier in a way to connect, it's made it harder in terms of energy in order to be as engaged as you would if you met, in an office or, again, over a coffee or something like that. So it does happen, but it does feel like it is a lot more difficult. And with all the noise of all the information, all the people pitching to you, all the stories you want to cover, and on top of that 24/7 news cycle at the moment, in order to make those connections, it does require something a bit more special, which has made it a lot more difficult.
Great. Penny, John, agree, disagree with that? Any similar feelings?
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's been hard not to be able to meet someone for a coffee or lunch, or meet someone at a conference and just have a little side chat with them. On the other hand, I'm finding a lot of people who I normally might have just had a phone call with now want to do it as a Zoom call. So in a way, it's a little bit better for relationship building than just talking to people on the phone. I think just being able to see each other and see each other's homes and that kind of thing. But like Lianna said, there's definitely Zoom fatigue. If you have several Zoom meetings in a row, I think it gets really hard, and that definitely gets in the way of productivity also. So so a little bit of both, but mainly I would say it's harder to build new sources in this environment.
Great. Well, pivoting a little bit, I know, sort of consumption of content and media and sort of the pressures that you all face to write and produce content. I'm curious just to hear your thoughts in terms of how you feel content has evolved with many readers, consumers, et cetera, kind of reading with limited attention spans or utilizing a mobile device. How has your coverage sort of evolved recently and even over the years to kind of take that into consideration in terms of content consumption?
I'll start. I'll say that, if you think about, if you go back, whatever it was, 150 years ago, like news was on a newspaper and like you'd like get it at your house and you'd like go to the chair and like maybe get a cup of coffee and then like you'd like open it. And there's like no competition. You know what I mean? Like if you wrote the story, like they were reading your story. Now it's just a totally different environment, right? Obviously, I'm saying something that we all know, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now you are fighting every second. Like if you look at the data on how long people will stay on articles, I mean, it's like they'll give you like 3 seconds to make your point. If you don't make your point, they'll leave. You know what I mean? So what it does is, and you can look at it in one of two ways, right? You can be like, oh, that's really unfortunate because the attention spans of the consumer of media is so low. So what does that say about human beings? You know what I mean? Maybe that's a bad thing. I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm not a psychologist. But you can look at it on the other side. And what it does is it gives really, really good writers an opportunity to distinguish themselves in this environment. Because writing good headlines and writing good leads, like that's like writing 101. So if you can nail those things, it gives you a competitive advantage. So really it's about, you know, going back to the fundamentals and just being really, really good at those and then executing.
Right. Jim,
John, I agree. Yeah, I agree with John on that, and I think it's actually created very, very strong reporters and editors. You know, less is more on the web. You know, you used to read a 700-800 word or 1,000-word newspaper article. That doesn't exist anymore. So the reporter has to get into the story very quickly. The accuracy is there too, because you know there's a need for speed. I know at CNBC on my personal finance team, I tell my guys truly, I'd rather be second and right than first and wrong. I tell them you've got to be squeaky clean. And to John's point, you've got to hit that reader very quickly. So, you know, a very tight lead and a nut graph has to move and get that reader in because their attention span is really small. So I think it actually has enhanced the writing and the editing. You know, we're writing 5 and 6 headlines for the same story. And so there's a lot of work that goes into one story that gets posted.
Lianna, are you seeing sort of similar things at Yahoo Finance?
Yeah, I think like with most, whether you're digital-only outlets or a mix of it, everyone during any kind of crisis, so whether it's the financial crisis all the way back then, which feels like a million years away, to the health pandemic, to anything from Brexit or elections, whenever there's a moment like this, digital traffic always seems to spike if you're really, really hitting those stories. So that is like something that's been happening for everyone. And yeah, it has been a lot more frenetic. It has been a lot more 24/7. And you have to, just as John said as well, really, really fight for every eyeball that goes on that. But it's not just about people coming on the stories. What we've really seen is really testament to when you, and like Jim said, really put this care and love into those stories, whether it's a breaking news one or some analysis or things like that, is actually keeping those users coming back, keeping those people wanting to come back for more. That's been the harder part, I think, for all the industry, not just during a crisis, but previous as well, is that anyone can get clicks. But what we really want is engaged readers, people that come back and they know what they're getting, and also at the same time trust that the things that you're writing about is not just adding value, but it's trustworthy. So that's very key elements that we've been seeing evolve, especially right now when there's so much disinformation, because not necessarily from a sinister point of view, but because of the speed that everything's happening, mistakes happen. So you need to be more on top than ever.
And so maybe that's a good transition to the kind of the flip side in terms of, you know, if you're a bank or a fintech sort of looking to insert yourself into coverage. Penny, I'll toss this one out to you. Knowing that stories are going to be shorter, attention spans are tighter as well. It would seem then to be a credible source to get inserted into that story. What are you looking for at American Banker and at some of your sister publications as well when it comes to kind of creating stories that are not only obviously credible and, you know, digestible, but what are you looking for from sources to contribute to those stories?
Well, the main thing is a very quick response, you know, because we're often trying to get coverage of a topic done within a few hours or at least within the day. So if people can, you know, respond and take a short call, a short interview right away, that's really very helpful. The person who gets back to you the next day after the story's posted, it just doesn't help so much. And you know, I mean, what do I look for in sources? I guess is credibility, is a lack of bias. You know, if someone sells software in a category, they're not an unbiased observer of that category. So those are the two main things. And, experience in an area obviously is something else that we look for. Often we're looking for quick data points, so that's really helpful too. If you've done a survey that applies to a particular area, or you've just collected data in a particular area, that can be very helpful to us too. So we can put together a quick infographic, because that's one more thing that I think has become a little more important as we've all gone digital, is wanting to have really good graphics, and especially infographics that tell a good story quickly. So those are a few things.
Great. Open it up to the rest of the group. Thoughts on that question?
Well,
John,
like Penny said, credibility. I'm sorry. Credibility is really the key factor to this. You're always wanting to make sure the source is something that is really credible, that when people read it, they recognize the name or they understand what the person is saying. What I look for is someone with a very strong opinion. Some of the people you talk to, they just give you these very straight pieces that you can get from anybody, straight answers. So you're looking for someone with a very strong opinion about something, and it really has something to say, and maybe can expand out beyond what we're interviewing them about. They're bringing some other information, almost like they're bringing something that we weren't thinking about. That every good reporter ends an interview by saying, "What didn't I ask you?" It's always good when that person tells you that before you ask that question. Something really strong. So that's what I look for with my reporters.
Perfect. John, what are you looking for? Someone that probably works closely with the C-suite at various banks. Is that sort of narrative shifting at all for you?
They teach you in media training to answer the question you want asked as opposed to the one that was. So you answer the question that question.
I love it.
Every day, and I'm sure Lianna, Jim, and Penny, we can all attest to this. Our email inboxes are like jam-packed with like emails from PR companies. And it's so unfortunate. And it's just like delete. And what's so unfortunate is that like we're all looking for good stories. You know what I mean? Like if somebody can bring us a good story, it's like a dream come true. But you never get those. And the reason this is my analysis. I don't know if this is true. This is just my analysis of it. The reason is that like when you pitch a story, don't pitch a story that's good for you. Pitch a story that's good for everybody. Like the relationship between the story and the publication needs to be symbiotic. Like both parties need to get something out of that. And so you got to pitch a good story. Everybody's talked about credible sources. You got to pitch it with credible sources, not people who don't have a background in whatever the subject matter is or is biased. And then you got to get your point go back to this point that we made at the very beginning. Just like we as writers have to get our points across immediately. In those emails, less is more. Get your point across. Let us know that it's a compelling story, and then get out of the way. And that will dramatically increase your conversion rate, if you will, of getting your stories taken up, at least in my case.
Yeah, and so to that point, I guess for all four of you, maybe just, how often, raise your hand here, how often are you covering product releases from a company? So maybe a little bit. So
once in a while.
Yeah.
It depends what kind of product. That's the thing. Like there's some things that are very interesting. So for example, this may not be, I suppose, it depends. And it depends on the trend, and it depends how the story is sold, but also how does it fit into the wider thing. So for example, some of the non-Fintech, I know we're on Fintech here, but this example, we don't cover esports really. But there is this huge hardware, this product that was being released, and we really want to cover it because at the moment, during COVID, all the companies related to esports and streaming and gaming has become a whole new thing. Well, not a whole new thing, but has been reinvigorated and has become like an extra bring even financial services into it. So you think about the company like Razer, they are now building a fintech component to their whole suite of gaming stuff. Like things like that evolve, then we cover a product or something with some of the challenger banks, something that is a bit exciting. Yeah, we may actually cover it because we have the bandwidth and we are, the way we cover things is a bit more broad. And so therefore we have the route to cover those things. But it wouldn't be by the by every single time a product drops and we see a press release, we do something. It would be like, what is the extra story that we can tell behind this? What does it fit into? And sometimes it really hits a sweet spot, then we'll do it. But it's not often that we'll do like a product cover every single week, for example.
Okay, well, great. I want to transition a little bit into social media. I think it's something obviously increasing in popularity, and my question's twofold for the group. And Penny, we'll start with you. I think, as a reporter, are you looking at your sources, social media channels, and utilizing it as sort of a way to engage with potential sources? I think our listeners would be curious to hear more on that front.
Occasionally, yeah. I mean, especially if I have identified someone that I want to talk to, sometimes I'll look at their Twitter feed to just see like what they've been thinking about, what they've been posting about, just to get a little bit of background on them. I wouldn't say that I find sources a lot through social media, but occasionally, I personally, and I know everyone on my team feels this way, it's hard to find the time to just spend a lot of time reading in social media. So I try to like dip in and out a couple times a day if I can, and just kind of see what the circle of people I follow are talking about. And because, every now and then I'll think, oh, maybe we should do a story on this if everyone's talking about this particular thing. But I would say I use it sort of occasionally, and I don't think it's the greatest medium for reaching out to people. And again, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I do think it's better to just try to get a phone number and email address rather than approach somebody through Twitter. LinkedIn is a little bit better, but a Twitter direct message, I think, can seem a little creepy. I don't know what other people think about it, from someone you've never met. But yeah, as you say, social media is increasingly important. We're all trying to spend a little more time on that, a little more time, sometimes promoting our stories, sometimes just being part of a conversation. What I like better is to just be part of a conversation about some kind of issue that people care about, whether or not we're doing a story on it, and just be sort of part of the group conversation.
Jim, what's your take on it? If someone's DMing you on Twitter, is that something you're utilizing? How's social impacting kind of you at CNBC?
We actually have quite the opposite from Penny. My guys actually go out of their way to use Twitter to find sources. We've been obviously doing a lot of deep dive coverage with the stimulus package, the PPP program. And one of our reporters is just covering the unemployment issues that are happening because of COVID. And they have successfully used social media, specifically Twitter, because what we're trying to do is find real people that are experiencing some serious hardship right now. And those people are on social media, and they're just interacting with each other. So my guys have found a way to find these people, and what they actually do, I'll tell you guys, I'm not giving away any secrets, but they actually embed it in their story. At the end of a story, they might be doing a story about an unemployment issue that came out, and the reporter will say, this is a continuing story. If you want to reach out to me, whatever, and they embed it in the story, and then the story goes out on social media. We have actually gotten some really wonderful first-person stories through social media. Really, basically Twitter. We've used a little bit of Facebook, but Twitter has been the number one source. I'm an old guy. I've been doing this for 38 years. My young reporters have found a way to capture this, and I hate to say it, my older reporters are now going to the young guys saying, how did you get all of these great people? So my young guys are now teaching my old dogs some new tricks, and it's really been working out really well. I'll tell you, we've gotten some really good stuff. So.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you, Jim. Like on our side, it's very similar because there's different ways to cover the story, and one of the ways that we cover the story is the human aspect behind the numbers, right? So when we see all these crazy chart numbers and we see all these horrific unemployment figures, what is the human impact on people's businesses, livelihoods, their homes, their ability bots and all those things. And those people are on Twitter, and we may not make the story from the tweets. They can be supportive, but like Jim said,
Right.
they are a really good point on how you can pull those people and start that conversation. And also, sometimes what's interesting is that even aside from that, when we have these big investigative stories, that follows a trend into a company and maybe staff that aren't happy and things like that, Twitter, for example, or some social media can be the stepping stone into seeing what people are talking about, what people are unhappy about, prompting a thought of a thread to keep pulling at. And that could be something that has led some of my fantastic reporters to do similar thing, as to follow and keep going and going. And I just say the last thing as well, why social media important? And again, not maybe based on the whole story on it, but now Twitter has become this thing where politicians, heads of state, CEOs start saying stuff on Twitter before their poor PRs have even noticed that's gone out. They're probably, oh my God, what have they put out on Twitter? But you've just got to see, it's almost become an extra news wire in a way that enables you to be able to, again, start a story. So, but we are obviously a kind of different outfit too. So it's...
John, in terms of social media, and maybe just flipping the question around, are you finding sort of social as a way to kind of expand your distribution network in terms of sort of pushing content out, and any trends you're noticing in terms of Bank Director, in terms of sort of consumption of media on social as well?
So I would first of all agree with everything that everybody has said. Yeah. So this is how I would answer that. I would say that you can think about it in the context of, to your point, this distribution channel. It's a distribution channel through which you put your own content, right? And I think that everybody would agree that when you can see that from a mile away, right? When somebody's just doing that, they're just using it to stuff their own content in, you're like, I'm not sure that's an effective strategy. But the other element of social media is that it's this forum. And I think that that's kind of what Lianna was getting at. That's what Jim was getting at. I think Penny was touching on it too, to a certain point. And it's so if you can, like a Venn diagram, if you can insert yourself into that forum while also using it as a distribution channel, I think that's where it works. And candidly speaking, I think that's really hard to do. It's something that we struggle with. I don't know anybody who's totally nailed that. I mean, I think there's some individuals out there that you follow that are really, really good at that. As an organization, I think that is more challenging, because it's how do you have a voice? How do you have one singular voice? Because it's that voice is like a person, you know what I mean, who's running it. So I think that's a difficult thing to let me say the one other thing. We're getting kind of an echo. Some of my most important relationships have been formed over social media. And I think, and again, this is just my theory, but my theory is that when we get all these emails from PR companies, people all day, it's unqualified traffic, right? These are just people just blasting everybody. But if you reach out to me or Penny or Lianna or Jim over Twitter, you probably looked at our Twitter feed. So you're probably not going to send me something about family planning when I write about banks. You know what I mean? So it has been a source for a handful of really important relationships that I've been able to form, and other writers at Bank Director have been able to form.
That's a good point. And transitioning too, just in terms of kind of content and distribution, Penny, I'll start with you, and the panel can chime in here as well. But, in terms of newsletters, for example, I mean, we're bombarded with them, yet there obviously is some effectiveness to it in kind of pushing out really, whether it's breaking news, et cetera. How are you seeing sort of the trend in sort of newsletters and kind of email marketing of your stories as well, at American Banker?
Yeah, thank you. We were making pretty extensive use of artificial intelligence in our newsletters, and the artificial intelligence decided what each reader was most likely to want to get, to want to click on. And then we were just letting the machines decide. We've more recently walked that back a little bit, so that we are doing more of a combination of curation and artificial intelligence, because I think we realized that the technology wasn't quite ready to give people exactly the content that we wanted them to receive. So, we've come to this sort of hybrid human AI kind of approach, and the same is true for our for some of our marketing too. It's just the machine can be so helpful in understanding what people have clicked on and the categories that they're interested in and so forth. But we still find some usefulness in having an editor decide what the top story will be, what the subject line will be, just because we know our individual audiences so well. So I'd be curious what other people are finding with that.
Yeah, Lianna, I'd love to hear what Yahoo's doing in terms of strategy when it comes to financial stories.
Yeah, I mean, newsletter part. I mean, I am a huge fan of newsletters, not just because we do them, but also because, as a consumer of one, and it does feel like a bit of a juxtaposition of, oh, we're all busy, we get so many emails, oh my God, there's so many, we can't keep up. And then it's like, oh, there's a newsletter that I really like, I'm going to click on that. And no matter how much stuff has evolved in digital media, we keep going back or having a renaissance when it comes to email marketing. But I think one of the key things, the reason why they're still loved, is that newsletters are hard to do well. And the ones that do well is because there's a consistent voice. So the thing that John talks about and Pay talks about, having this identity and a unified voice, that's actually a lot easier to do in a newsletter, because I subscribe to about 9 that I regularly read, but each one of them are very different in their voices, but I know what I'm going to be getting in each of them. So in terms of when you do that, it is, and keeping those subscribers on, I think it's a very, I still think it's a very creative way to reach out to people and build that audience. And Yahoo Finance, they've got a very popular one called Morning Briefing. While it may be very, very, market-based, and companies and lots of other people do that, what really makes that one stand out is because there's this very real, the voices in it. You can tell who writes it. You can tell the kind of lingo in the story, the kind of links. You know what you're going to get. And I think that's when it comes to extra things that people can do to reach an audience. The newsletter is a very authentic way to actually get to readers that you want reading your stuff.
That's great. And how is artificial intelligence something that Yahoo is utilizing in terms of news generation or newsletter kind of push out per Penny's comments?
Not yet, but not that I know of. We'll see. See if the pink slip comes in, and but who knows? There hasn't been anything generated on that. There has been recently, though. I noticed there was that the article that's been circulating the internet quite recently over the last 48 hours that The Guardian did, where they had a robot write that article. And it was really interesting because the entire article was just written by AI. But what was really interesting about it is that even though it was written well, you could still really tell that it was written by a robot. There were so many things that were inauthentic of it being human in a way, that even in terms of language or turn, which makes you mistrust maybe the kind of content in it because you don't get context from it. So while we're not using AI in that purpose, there's a lot of ad tech and the technology side of the business, which obviously I'm not really involved in, but there's a lot of that kind of capability in every tech company built out, but obviously I'm not in a position to really talk about that side.
Sure, and I think, I've even noticed that in terms of reading earnings releases powered by AI, they kind of hit the salient points, but there's no commentary or insight as well. So knock on wood, I think thankfully, there will always be that great storytelling ability by you guys as reporters to kind of help readers. Kind of transitioning into current events, for those of us who haven't heard, there's an election coming up in give or take 2 months as well, and sort of the broader trend of fake news, continues to be an issue that is impacting social media consumption, just broader news consumption. John, I'd love to kind of hear your take on how you feel media can kind of drive traffic to content, to stories responsibly, and any trends you've noticed in sort of the fintech space as well.
Well, that's a big
deep thinking for you, yeah. Queued up the hard one for you.
Yeah. Well, let's see here. Let me break that down. So in terms of the fake news, I mean, the internet's the Wild West. I mean, anybody can put anything and anybody can call anything news. So it's like, and that can be fake or not. Like the publications that you're talking to right now, we are all legitimate publications. And so, and the New York Times is legitimate. I mean, like all of these are legitimate publications, and it's easy to look at them and like to say like, oh, they've made some errors in their articles. Well, look, like we're all human beings. We're not robots yet, and like human beings make errors. We just have to recognize that. But in my life, in the media world, like everybody is very well-meaning, and accuracy is very important. So like, I guess I understand the point about fake news because there is that out there. There are entities out there that are trying to distribute that, and I understand that. But your mainstream media is not. I mean, I just don't relate to that very well. But in terms of like what you can do for your organization, and Lianna and Penny probably know infinitely more about this. I mean, like I check American Banker 2-3 times a day. I'm on Yahoo Finance probably 10 times a day. You know what I mean? Like they have if you have credibility, like an audience is gonna go to you. So it's about like unpacking what credibility is. You know what I mean? Yahoo Finance has like the best portal for checking your stocks on the whole internet. I mean, like that. Where else can you get that? And then they can they can associate that with their content. So that's a wonderful thing. American Banker is like the news source in the banking industry. So it's like you're driven to those sources. So in my opinion, like again, fake news, I understand it. For entities like us, I think it's overrated. But the way to combat that, I think, is through unpacking credibility.
Well, you just won us both over. Thank you, John.
Yeah, exactly. Checks in the post.
I mean, so to that end, and maybe Penny, this is for you. I mean, is it something, whether in the fintech or banking space, that you're concerned about? I mean, it's obviously in this day and age, it's fairly easy to kind of construct a website and post information on it and drive traffic to it as well. It might not be permeating the banking and fintech sector quite yet, but there have been issues, for example, in the cryptocurrency space as well, where there's less regulation. So maybe just broadly speaking, we'd love just your insight in terms of how you feel that fake news can be combated, by strong journalism.
Yeah, I think, like John said, I feel like most of the publications that are like us and cover the same things we do are fairly reputable. There are lots and lots of new competitors. So there's new competition every day, which keeps us on our toes. And there are, different levels of quality. But I guess we would say we do have sort of a core audience. And I think that some of that has been affected by all the competition that we have, but not as much by the fake news trends, I would say. I think if anything, the more dramatic, sort of fake news type stories drive people more to the traditional media sites. At least the people that we're trying to reach, they want to get the real answers.
Okay. Well, I know we're at about 5 minutes or so, and I think one of the questions that I wanted to throw out there, and we're getting from the audience too, was what is the most popular story that you all have covered this year, not including COVID, and maybe just some insight in terms of why it was the most popular story. Lianna, we'll start with you on that front.
Echo.
Only if I don't
Yeah.
echo.
Yeah, so COVID is obviously a lot of out there seem to have the industries. I know that they broad and different ways. But what has been interesting for us to cover, even though we go company by company, is this is the crunch moment for a lot of fintech companies, and especially the unicorns that have been perfect for years and years and the incumbent bank. And so I know this is probably a cop-out by not doing a specific trend of a story, but I do think it's been very, very, very important that we've been covering a multitude of companies where it is this crunch time and what it's going to look like, because post-COVID, are all these challenges going to exist? Are they going to partner up? Are they going to be absorbed? Are they going to finally, just when some of them are becoming profitable, suddenly that's all been wiped out? It's been really, moving at a speed that we've never seen before. So in terms of the kind of energy and excitement that we've been covering the industry, it has been on that level as well as on individual company levels.
John, maybe favorite story as well, and insight into why and what made it that way in terms of that bank director.
All right. So these are from the magazine. Favorite for everybody because we can't track how many eyeballs we do. But my favorite was wrote a story about this guy named Raj Cohen. Raj Cohen is the giant in the legal world, who has been at the intersection of every big bank deal over the past 550 years. Just hearing Raj's take on it, what he is, was really rich intellectual experience.
Penny,
Yeah, I would say in terms of most popular stories, the Wells Fargo scandal is the gift on giving for us. When we do another story on the aftermath of that and the ongoing saga of the lawsuits against Wells Fargo, the congressional hearings, any new bits of scandal, those all do really well for us. I would say some of my favorite stories are the Fintech profiles that we do. Somebody who has a really good idea, they executed well. We had a story on a company called Current recently, and they're a fintech several years ago, done really well. And they have about half of their users are Black. So it's very timely, and it's just interesting that we covered them when they were just beginning. They were nothing, and now they've got, I think, 2 million users, and it's just very it's kind of exciting when that happens and you see a company really grow and thrive, even in this tough environment.
And I know, and Penny, you broke up a little bit in there, but I think the context of that was kind of being able to profile emerging fintechs that have a really kind of compelling trend that's timely. you know, as well. So, well, I know we have reached the end of our limit here. I'll go ahead and chat and post all of our contact info. But Jim, I know we had a little echo issue with you, but we're glad to have you at least in the front end of that conversation as well. Thank you, John. Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Lianna. Thank you, Jim. Awesome session. I would tell all of our people listening today to make sure to follow all of these folks, whether it's on Twitter or social, and read their stories. They are, you know, they're great writers and share a ton of info in terms of what's going on in the financial services and fintech space. So thank you all again, and look forward to reading your work soon.
Thank you, Kevin. It's fun.
Much.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.